Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Weird Science Indie Comic Boom podcast. As always, I'm here with my man Rocky. What up, Rocky?
Life is good, my friend. Another beautiful weekend. I'm beginning to think doing these indie podcasts with you is bringing me a lot of good luck here in my home country of Canada, and it puts me in a good mood.
That's
When
good.
I can drink Corona all day, have a couple steaks, and then review indie comics, life is good, my friend.
That is a pretty good deal. I did not have steaks. I did not have a Corona, but the weather's pretty good here outside of the Philadelphia area. Probably not as nice as Canada. But here we are. We have actually 4 books this week. We haven't quite had this many before, so we are spreading our wings here. And what we have is a new #1 that kind of is the big play is that it's Kevin Smith. So that's going to be the big play on that. But we are going to return to a couple books that we already did. Sacrament. We're going to have Trve Cvlt, which we really like that first issue. And There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd, which me and you are really enjoying. And
Huh?
just as a spoiler for the end, because we'll talk about that last, I'm still enjoying that book as well. But how do we feel about these new books? We're going to have to see because we're starting with Maskerade #1, getting right to this. And I do have the solicits for these. So I'll go through the solicits. Sometimes, again, it's funny when you read the solicits, not this Maskerade, but the other ones where you find out new information through the solicit. Always drives me nuts. But this is Maskerade #1, written by Kevin Smith and Andy McElfresh, with a script by Kevin Smith, art by John Sprengelmayer. These are
Say
I
that
don't know
10
why
times.
I don't know why these are hard for me to say here. It's published by Dark Horse,
And you're
and
even
it did come
sober at
this
the
week.
time. That's
Yeah,
what's
I mean,
amazing.
yeah, seriously. Maybe that's what the problem is. I need to actually drink a little to be able to say names. At least I got Kevin Smith's name right.
Mm.
Felicia Dance is hiding in plain sight. The provocative social media star and shock TV sensation has one of the most recognizable faces in the world, so she can't capture and kill the butchers who murdered her little brother and experimented on Felicia like a lab rat when she was a child. Actually, I said not this one. I mean this one now because this is nothing that I think we get in this. Not unless
You know,
she looks like someone else. The face of justice is reshaped forever in Maskerade, an exciting new vigilante comic series from writers Kevin Smith and Annie McElfresh and artist John Sprengelmayer, marking the dynamic debut of Smith's Secret Stash Press imprint with his very own vigilante. An all-new sci-fi crime drama from the writer and filmmaker Kevin Smith and screenwriter, I say it again, Andy McElfresh. And so that is a lot more than we get in this first issue. I mean, a lot more, right?
it is. I mean, it's what's so funny is, and you did this last week by reading the solicits, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think you've said this multiple times on your podcast when you review many comics that often the solicits give away the plot points that are not revealed in the first issue. I did not really know that. I inferred that by the end of this
Yeah.
issue that this was kind of a revenge tale, but it's definitely an inference. It's not exactly necessarily spilled. It's, well, I guess
Yeah.
it's kind of obvious maybe by the end, but I'm kind of glad that I don't read the solicits in a way because
Mm-hmm.
I can actually can you imagine if a TV show was like that? Well, not nowadays. TV shows are like that too nowadays with all
Yeah,
the
everything
advertisements and
comes
the
out
trailers.
before. That's what happens. And with that, here's the deal. We're now making a rule. No reading the first issue solicits. Once you get going, I don't mind, but the first issue. And so
Yeah.
that the problem is because I do believe, and they should not do this, but a lot of times I'm not so sure that these aren't the elevator pitch of what the series is going to be. And then when they end up doing that first issue, they end up not changing it, not adjusting it because boy, that's a lot more. And there might have been some spoilers there. So where's Jess? We need to edit that out. But in that, I mean, you're really pushing the idea. Okay, if you're a Kevin Smith fan, you're going to check this out. Now, Kevin Smith has kind of gotten on the bad side of people, recently a bit. He ends up fighting with people more on Twitter than I ever thought that he did in the past,
It's that damn
especially.
He-Man.
It's the
It's that
He-Man. It
He-Man
is.
curse.
That is the He-Man curse. And so he kind of ended up after that kind of like really, I don't know, it's standing up for himself, but he ends up really poking people a lot. And here's the thing. I was a Kevin Smith fan, but I was never a super fan. I ended up at one point, me and Eric, who I do the DC stuff with, me and him had gotten into arguments at point because he was a really big Kevin Smith fan. I'm a Quentin Tarantino fan. And I thought that at one point they kind of were that, but Quentin's a little better in my mind. But with this, Kevin Smith has some pedigree in comics. This is obviously not his first comic. Did a bunch of things, some Batman, some Green Arrow, all that stuff. That is pretty
Yeah.
darn good. So I was looking forward to this. And without that solicit, I did think by the end of this first issue, I was a little bit confused about, the not just the whole basis of it, but the idea of not really knowing the main character much at all and not really knowing much about any other characters. There's characters thrown at you in this that I'm not even sure are that important at points. And I thought that it might have been a bit of a misplay the way that this was set out for a first issue and to set up it's a mystery, obviously, but it didn't really grab me as much as I was hoping. How about you?
Well, I have to admit that the first 2 or 3 pages,
Hmm.
actually kinda grabbed me a bit. When we're first introduced to this Dwayne character, I right away it reminded me of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson,
Yeah.
and he was and he's having sex with Jennifer Aniston,
Jennifer Aniston,
and that's what it looks
obviously.
like, and
Yes.
so
Yeah.
right away, I'm thinking this is it kinda caught my attention because I figure it's real life celebrity, but obviously in a different universe,
Hmm.
and obviously it's dealing with some aspects of social media, and I'm inferring this as I'm going along. I really don't know what this is, but
Hmm.
at the beginning, a girl jumps off, in this city called the Trench, near the bay, and sort of a fictional city called Trenton, near modern day San Francisco.
Hmm.
And this sexy woman jumps off a building, and she ends up killing herself, and we're not really sure why. And then we have we know the lead character is this Felicia character, who is this sort of like Instagram
Yeah.
sensation, and she uses herself as jailbait to nail
Like
rich
to catch
people
a
who are,
predator.
yeah, catch a
She does
predator and
that. Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah. But with
So
herself as the bait. That's
yeah,
the big
yeah, and
play.
right away, within the first 6, 7 pages, this Dwayne Johnson guy, or that's what I'm calling what
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
name's actually Dwayne in the actual story. He actually loses his job because he's caught having sex with the wife of the producer of the new show. He's a producer. He's out of a job, and the producers of this By Felicia, this
Hmm.
Felicia has a show called By Felicia. They're looking to hire a producer, and so they want to hire him. And then the mystery is, well, exactly what's going on with this Felicia character, and I guess some of it was ruined by the solicits that you read.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Now you start off and legit, the start off with the woman jumping off. It's straight up Lethal Weapon. Lethal Weapon 1. That is how you start Lethal Weapon. So that's kind of a funny play. And then you do have. I mean, if you want to say, well, that Dwayne guy you look now, Jennifer Aniston's Jennifer Aniston, and in fact, I didn't know how he was playing the whole deal. I actually thought that the guy coming in the door, her husband, was going to look like Brad Pitt as a wink, wink back in the day. Doesn't quite, but you end up having this Dwayne needed a job and goes with this By Felicia. Now, the idea of this show is to catch a predator. She ends up, you would think going online, meeting. Where do you get the smiling wave and the By Felicia and anything that would be like? Does she make these guys when they come? Oh, I didn't have these flowers and candy for Bye Felicia, and God, it's very odd, but it's kind of funny. And in this too, this is straight up. It's very, very mature for a lot of the things that we're doing. There's a lot of cursing in it. There's a lot of sexual situations. So just to be wary of that if that's not your thing. I'm a bit of a prude, but I could get through it. And so with this though, you're sitting there and I just now that I know the solicit, I kind obviously know more of what's going on, but maybe that's even confusing me a little and more confusing me of why did you start it like you did here? I mean, even if you want to really go to it, you end up then switching off to then a guy who looks a lot like Rush Limbaugh, and he is there with a hooker who's doing, drugs, and then all of a sudden you get this mysterious, almost like android looking character that comes in. We could guess that this is Felicia. But even then, at the point, it just seems disjointed. I'm hoping and I'm guessing that it's gonna take an issue or 2 to get everything together and see what is happening. But, you have this girl who you said she's an Instagram, TikTok person that's got her fame, and now she's gonna use that fame seemingly to become a vigilante. But how does this Dwayne guy, even if he does end up being her producer, how does that, advance the story? What does that do? She keeps saying, they even said she keeps firing her producers. Is this because they found out about like I don't know how this plays, or is it something like more nefarious and this Dwayne's in trouble doing it, but we'll see. But this guy ends up this important guy, maybe a mobster. You don't really know because he has guys waiting down below. She comes in and grabs him, and then I'm thinking the idea now is like, is this part of the show? Like a crazy show then, but it doesn't seem to be, and they end up, pretty much taking care of this guy and taking him down, and as he says, "Hey, if you end up taking me, if you kill me, you're gonna get stopped because my men are waiting. They're gonna wait for me to leave." And she says, "Oh, they'll see you leave," and scans his face, and it's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life in a comic book when she takes her mask off, because it seems as if this outfit then can replicate any person's face. And then when you take it off, but still has big boobs, and they even say it. His guys even say it as a guy. It's very odd. There's a lot of odd things. It's like all thrown in this hodgepodge of funny little scenes, but they don't quite connect for me. But when you see what looks like maybe a Rush Limbaugh with big boobs, it really threw me off. It really did. And so with that, the big play here is then when this guy gets taken and put in a cage. But I'm telling you, it's hard for me to even explain this page for page because it does end up having such, crazy stops and like, okay, these guys are talking about, hey, the boss is up there. Hey, look at him. There he is. He's got big boobs. Let's go to the strip club. All right. And then the next thing, this guy, this Rush Limbaugh, he wakes up in a cage where this person still with his face is pretty much, saying, "Yeah, you're back here. Remember the orphanage? Remember all those things you did?" And it's just everything is like a bunch of info just hitting
Yeah.
me. You know what I
And
mean?
there's 10 cages there, so
Yeah,
obviously we
yeah.
know that she plans on capturing at least, 9
Crazy.
other individuals, obviously, and I guess we know from the solicits that, that they must have she must have something planned, so obviously this has more to this obviously this is far more than just capturing somebody,
Yeah,
turning them into the police. Because I mean, obviously, if you're caging them yourself, you must have something nefarious planned, and you're obviously a vigilante, so
yeah.
that's the clue that she's obviously a vigilante here. So, um, I'm, the bigger question is, I'm wondering why the hell, what the hell do they need a producer for? I mean, you think that how do you hide something like this from a producer?
And
I
here's the
mean,
weird play. You have all this, right? And at this point, pull the solicit back. We don't know. You end up like, who is this? Like, what's going on? What happened?
yeah,
Because you never really get introduced to our main character, who we assume is Felicia. You get a lot of talk about her. You end up when Dwayne ends up losing this job because Jennifer Aniston's giving him a blow job. He ends up like, okay, I need work. His buddy comes in and says, "Oh, you know what? I got some things for you, but you'd have to work for by Felicia." And he's like, "Oh, no, no way. That's bull crap." He thinks he's above that. It's funny too because if and me and you are a little bit older than the average, bear here, but in that, it's funny because when we were kids, the real play was the idea of movie stars wouldn't go on TV. That was a big thing, "Oh, I'm not gonna slum it on the TV." But then, and I think it was pretty much the show 24 that really pushed the idea, "Okay, we can make some money on the TV." Now it's almost like in this, it does play out like, "Oh, I'm a TV star. I don't need to deal with anybody from the TikToks and stuff." It always goes downhill with the stuff, but she's doing the show. He doesn't wanna get involved. He's desperate, right? So, but we never see her. But it's all this Felicia Dance. It's spelled out, and she's had problems, so you're kinda guessing the idea she might be a diva, something like that. So then this vigilante comes in, and then I'm thinking when we see this guy who I said looked like Rush Limbaugh, I actually thought at first, could this be Dwayne's friend, but he's too old? I thought, could this be because at the beginning, it's even spelled out that this big tower is owned by this fancy guy that we never see or hear from again in this either. This they mention a Dr. David Ditt. Oh, is this? No, it doesn't seem like him. Who the hell is this? So when you get to the point, what gets even wackier, when this vigilante then takes this guy and puts him in the cage and says, "Do you remember the orphanage? Do you remember this? And then do you remember who I am?" And he actually remembers and goes, "Scarlet." And then she says, "Why, Mr. Atkins? You sure know how to make a girl feel positively famous." She then takes away, she puts the mask back on because she looks like him, getting back maybe her regular face, but now it's that Felicia because we saw her, but all scarred up. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. Like, well, what is happening? What's the deal? So it is intriguing, though, right? I mean, it's
Well,
intriguing because I don't know what the hell's going on,
yeah,
but
yeah, it's interesting, and when I think of the name Scarlet, I think of Scarlet Letter. I think of maybe being
uh,
scarred, and she has a scarred
yeah,
face, and
yeah.
that's one thing when she removes the mask, she has scars, but obviously in her online persona on her Instagram account, where she's known as sort of Fearless Fee, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
for Fearless Felicia, she has a beautiful face and she's very charismatic. But clearly, she's got a dark side here. It's almost like a real world Two Face in a
It
way,
is.
except
And
she's
but that's our main character. And so
yeah.
you're thinking like, okay, I get that this guy Kevin Smith sets it up. I mean, this guy is leaving what looks like at that point maybe a hooker, but probably a that seems almost like she's ODing, and he's just like, "Yeah, screw it," throws money at her, and he's gonna walk away from that. And so he's not a good guy. But when she does all this stuff, I'm like, she doesn't seem good either. And then you get the idea of this scarred up face. Okay, what does she do? How does she do this? And it seems like the idea that Kevin Smith, in my mind, is going with, like, say, a Batman. Everybody has their secret identity, but sometimes the secret identity isn't the real, like, Batman's the real person and the Bruce Wayne's the made up person. In this, I think he takes it a step further because however she got this tech, I don't even understand this tech. She must just put on that mask to make herself, okay, now I'm gonna press the button and become the sexy Felicia that ends up covering this because she seems to be able to replicate whatever
Yeah.
she does there. And I think that that might be the play. And as she goes around in this Catch a Predator, in the background, she's also seeking out these very personal, things that people did to her and stuff. But it ends up it is a bit of a hodgepodge for me about trying to grab and put a thumb down on the idea. Did I like it or not? I was more confused. But it's intriguing enough that I want to see what is going on and how it is and
Yeah.
whatnot. But
And I will say that at the beginning, when that young, seemingly attractive
mhm,
woman jumps off the building at the beginning, I'm wondering what was the real cause of that, because she's
yeah,
actually revealed to be an older lady, because she
yeah,
likely has had some face technology done or some plastic surgery done, because the comment made by the I think the butler
yeah,
when she
yeah,
lands
yeah.
on the
The
car is that her
doorman
hands
or
are all
whatever. Yeah.
wrinkly. She's got the face of a supermodel, but the hands and the body of a grandmother. So something's going on here. I I will say this, that I think I'm a little bit surprised for Kevin Smith. This this could have been a maybe a little bit. This didn't grab me as much as it should. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that there's more to this as it goes on. I mean, I'm kind of intrigued, but so I'm asking some questions that so I'm curious as to get to the second issue of this. But this didn't quite grab me as much as
It
I
didn't grab
as
me as much either.
yeah,
It really
uh,
didn't.
and it kind of surprises me a bit. But it's been a while since Kevin Smith's maybe done a comic, and he did collaborate with Andy McElfresh, who I've never heard of
Mhm.
on this
No,
one.
I haven't either.
But
Yeah.
I'm really curious. I'm still, if this is a I'm really curious to know the biggest thing that I'll give him some credit is, how in the hell does she plan to get away with this? Or maybe she doesn't, but how does this fearless Felicia, how does she plan on getting away with caging 10 people who've wronged her and actually somehow get away with it? Because clearly I'm
Yeah.
sure she has an out plan. That's what intrigues me. How is she going to be able to manipulate the media to maybe make herself look like a victim, despite the fact that she's the one that's
If she
terrorizing
gets
all these men who
yeah.
probably are jerks and who have previously abused her. I'm not saying they're likely very bad people as what
Mhm.
but I mean, I'm curious to see how this is going to resolve itself. So I'm not sure. Is this a 4 or 5 issue series? Do you know? Or
I'm not even sure. I'm
but
not sure. And with that, it's weird too because she takes this guy, she gets him. takes him back to what she says, this is the orphanage, in a way that doesn't make as much sense to me if this is the play, because remember at the beginning when Felicia and the whole thing with Dwayne, she's not from, or they say she's not from this town. She says she's in Trenchon, the trench as they call it. She's in here to do her show. They're doing it on location here. And that's why she ends up wanting Dwayne, and how it works out, because they want somebody local after she fired a bunch of other producers. So is that a lie? Like, it's weird. Like, where is this? Where did she take him back, especially if that is her? But again, I don't know. I am a little bit intrigued. What gets me though is when I think of Kevin Smith, and I think even his comic books, but all of his stuff, it's the clever dialogue and, that sort of thing that I think of Kevin Smith, and that this doesn't really have that. It really didn't have that feel. Like, sometimes, I might read something and go, "Oh my, who did this?" and go look, but I could have read this without knowing it was Kevin Smith, and it didn't have, like, a Kevin Smith flavor in my
Yeah,
mind. It didn't have that something, and I think that they are pushing the idea that that will get people to continue even through
yeah,
a very vague, mysterious first
yeah.
issue, and I don't know.
I should also say, I want to be a little bit critical of the art here. John Sprengelmeyer, I
Mhm.
thought his line work was a little bit too heavy in parts.
Yeah.
There's a full page, double page spread where this I guess the protagonist is
Mhm.
standing, standing over
The guy.
the guy, the senator, whatever.
Yeah,
Atkins is
whatever.
his name,
Yeah.
Atkins, and it just looks really sloppy. And I know that it's maybe meant to be that way because she has some facial technology, but so there's some sexiness to the women, to the female form, but the rest of it is a little bit wonky. I think that the color work by Guello Brusco is pretty good.
Mhm.
I think frankly the coloring saves some of the pages where the art's a little bit wonky. So, but all coming together, I think it kind of works. Like I never felt like the art took me out of the story.
No.
But I hope that the art maybe fine tunes itself moving
Yeah.
forward. But
Yeah, the
overall,
Jennifer Aniston looked great.
yeah, no, she did. Yeah,
That's right on, right?
exactly.
The funny
Yeah,
play is when you end up when she uses this technology and gets the head, it's so funny because that head, when you first see it, seems so much, like, too big for
yeah,
that body. It made me giggle. I'm like, "Look at that thing. It looks like a bobblehead." I'm like, "Oh," and I don't know if
yeah.
that was on purpose and then it has to readjust or whatnot, but overall, what would you give it?
I would, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go a 6. But it's a strong 6 because I'm entertained.
Yeah.
I'll give it a very strong. Maybe even I can go up to maybe a
I'm
six
going
five. But
6.5. I'm gonna
yeah,
go 6.5. When I first started, when I read it, I actually was even a little more like, well, I'm kind of intrigued. But then once reading that solicit and seeing what we didn't get and how this just kind of is a weird play, and maybe this will read better in trade, as there's the catchphrase that a lot of people use. But yeah, I'm gonna go 6.5. I'm gonna go 6.5. I agree exactly what you said about some of the art being wonky. Some of it looks pretty good, and then you go to another page and you're like, and then that makes it kind of a little jarring throughout, but also the story itself jarring because I don't know what the hell is going on. You have to realize it's a number one. There's a lot of comics out there. I mean, we're very happy to be doing this indie comics podcast because we do want to expand the comics we're reading, but with so many out there, you have to grab people right away. And I don't think this grabs just the idea. Oh, it's Kevin Smith, and I hate to say it because I'm an older man as well, but those days have kind of come and gone. He's got to impress me a little more than just putting his name on it, but he does do the script, so that's cool. But we'll move to the next book, and the next book is Sacrament. And this is something me and you were intrigued by when we first read it, when we ended up reading that number one. And I still am intrigued with what I like to think is it really reminds me of a religious Blade Runner is what I get the feeling from by the end of this, but we actually do get some cool little things. It seems like it's like a very subtle pacing. Like it's not going to be in your face. You're getting a lot of narration. You're getting a lot of little things, but when they connect, I'm like, oh, I see that. But it is Sacrament number two, written by Peter Milligan with art by Marcelo Fruzen. It's AWA, and here is the solicit for this. The Exorcist meets Alien. That's pretty good deal too. I just like my deal, religious Blade Runner. In this sci-fi horror story, in the year 3000, mankind abandoned Earth and fled to outer space. Now, a disgraced priest called into action to perform an exorcism on a remote space colony is about to discover that no matter how far you go, you can't escape your demons, and the devil is in fact real. See, that's a good, very vague, gets you in the mood for what this is, and you end up having some things come out. We end up seeing that exorcism that he ended up being upset about before, and seeing a little more of it, and also seeing a connection to this new one that he's doing. But I like this issue a lot because it does show, and we were talking about this idea of these trans subs, this drug that he was addicted to. And it just ended up seeming like, okay, that's but now that it connects, and really, in my mind, it connected a lot with the idea that he lost his faith. He ends up getting that faith taken away, but that's the way to get it back for that little bit. And I think that that was a pretty cool idea, especially as he's going through withdrawal of that. But we also get, this other deal for a widened part of the story, the idea that religion is looked at not very well by some people in the government who are really relying on science. And I like that science versus religion. It's almost like when we end up having Starhenge with the science versus magic. It's very similar in my mind about that. And I think that's a pretty cool deal as we get into it. But I'm going to give you the reins on this one because you liked the first one a bit more than I did as well, though I do like it still.
Yeah, no, I love. Well, I mean, it's exorcism in the far flung. I think
Yeah.
it's not even important whether it's 2 or 3,000 years in the future.
Hmm.
Exorcism, humanity has basically been scattered around the galaxy, and religion is sort of a dying sort of thing, and faith has sort of lost its power as well. But yet there's this, the central conceit of the story is there's definitely a strong Christian bias here. I mean,
Hmm.
Christian theology is sort of like at the heart of this, because there's people are getting possessed. This demon that 15 years before, this Father Vass, who's completely lost his faith. 15
Hmm.
years ago, when he was just an apprentice priest, he was involved in an exorcism that went horribly awry. The head
Yeah.
priest that taught him ended up being killed, and a lot of his memory is gone. And part of the central what I enjoyed about this second issue is that we got we got very conveniently, but I'm glad we got it very conveniently, the uh, the officer Marloff, who is
Hmm.
basically takes this priest and said, "Look, you got your good looking nun, his sister Ray. He basically uses Sister Ray, saying, "Look, Sister Ray's in prison. If you don't perform your exorcism on this Professor Zaka that we think was possessed." Because
Hmm.
he's showing signs of having a stigmata and all
Yeah.
this signs of Christian, there's all these Christian symbols and Christian, everything points
Yeah.
to a possession here. We need you, Father Vess, to perform an exorcism, and if you don't, we're not gonna protect Sister Ray. And in order to help him, this Father Vess reluctantly agrees, but in order to help them, he wants Sister Ray to help him as well. So they bring Sister Ray back to him by the end. But they also put him through a memory retrieval system to help him remember what happened at the first exorcism. And what
Hmm.
I really like about that is, yes, you kind of get some tropey cliche things, because but you also discover that at the beginning, 15 years ago, this demon 15 years ago actually references Ray
Yeah.
in the future. So we
Before
got
it
some,
even happened. Yeah.
yeah, we
That's
get some
crazy.
quantum. Yeah, so we get a little bit of science mixed in there as well. Is there time travel, or the quantum, and science and
Hmm.
religion? And I find that fascinating how it goes back and forth, and also just the way that uh, it also, I think, ironically, by remembering the terror, which he doesn't want to remember, he wants to forget. He wants to
Yeah.
be transubstant. He loves his transubstantiator, which is a glorified iPhone, which they put to their foreheads, and it sort of gives them some sort of addiction to their cerebral cortex, and that's sort of what replaces religion. It gives you that connection to almost.
It gives you an oomph. It gives
Yeah,
you, like, the feeling that you have faith in a
exactly. Sort
God
of, it's
and
a
things that
replacement to God, like you said,
and
like
he really needs it because of the idea, and
yeah,
again, we saw this in the first issue where when you do go and, you take communion, he was then you kinda tap them with that, and that's how they in my mind, that's how they wink, wink, get you to be religious and wanna get in it, but it ends up increasing that. But somebody who's lost his faith, this is a guy and he's, a priest who lost his faith, and it gives him that faith again that he so desperately needs in a world where after the things that he saw, he gave up. And even with the play of maybe even having that part of his brain removed and things that we heard about in that first issue as well, but this is the only way he can get that faith, that he's addicted to faith, and that's kind of a neat play. I thought that was neat, especially in a future that you're flying around in spaceships. The idea and going and seeing, and we talked about this, how would you react as a religious person when you end up going and meeting other alien races that have their own deal and whatnot? But
yeah,
this connection with whatever this deal, and the fun play of it is he doesn't have faith, but the only thing that seems to be grabbing him towards getting that back is actually the devil. This demon that might be folding time and doing these things that's speaking to him. It's not like he's seeing any references himself of God or anything that, I mean, just the idea that Ray, who he might have a thing for, this is what the demon's really centering on, but that's kind of what demons and devils do. But this Ray, who's just the nicest person, she's now in a prison where they're getting handsy. I mean, there's no sign of any God around, but right there is a sign of the devil. But again, you kind of go with the play. To have the devil, you have to have God. So I think that you're going to play a lot with that. But I think it's a really neat little twists and turns for
yeah,
this that Peter Milligan is really playing up. That whole deal, even like the symbolism where this guy, this professor, Zajka, however you pronounce it,
yeah.
where he is levitating upside down, pretty much, an invisible upside down crucifix that he's like attached to. You said the stigmata and all that is pretty crazy. And I'm telling you, everything points, if I was a priest, to be like, I'm getting the heck out of here. Like there is no God. There's only the devil. And I think that's the play, is what do you do when it does look like there's just the devil? Like, what happens? Then you throw in aliens and stuff like that that could be, because that's where the science comes in. They think they can explain this.
Yeah.
And I like where he's like, yeah, good luck. Like, yeah, you'll be coming back to me. But I do like the play where this government seems to be able to swoop in at any time. Like, okay, the government wants you to do an exorcism, and then a day later, exorcisms are off the books, and now you're arrested. I'm like, this is wacky. But you go
Yeah.
back, because I really think that it is a cool play through this as you see things unfold. It's very, like I said, I think the pacing overall is slow, but
Yeah.
for some reason I'm still intrigued by it. I still do like it. A lot of times that'll throw me off. It doesn't here because I kind of am into it.
And one of the things that works really well is the art by Marcelo Fruzen,
Yeah,
or
it's really good.
Fruzen or Fresen, I whatever,
Mhm.
because the way that he does expressions, the
Mhm.
expression particularly on Father Vess's face.
This, yeah.
I mean, wow. I mean, it really is. You really see the struggle that he's having and the torment that he has, at even the recollection and the memory of what he knows they're going to be facing. And he almost wants to escape, but he almost doesn't want to face it. And it's interesting because even Officer Marlov is overridden by his superiors,
Yeah.
because his superiors come in and say, "Look, we don't believe in this. We're going to use science to cure the professor here. We don't believe in this religion possession nonsense." And they actually override him, but they try. They try numerous things. All the technology of the future can't seem to cure him, even though on the surface, medically, they believe they should be able to cure him, but they can't. And so, literally, as a last resort, they give Father Vest, they tell him, "You got 4 days to work your exorcism. After that, forget it. Then we're going to go back to trying whatever it is we're going to try." But it's you really get a sense of something that's at stake here, and you really see that in this far flung future of this sort of like this imperial, Darth Vader
Mhm.
like empire that Officer Marlov is part of. Uh, clearly this is something where, when you can eliminate, when you have such control over the galaxy that nobody believes in the devil anymore, you've essentially destroyed faith and you can control it. But
Mhm.
if the devil exists, then God exists, and then faith exists. And if people can believe in something other than the empire, you've lost your power. So there's that, there's like the Jedi and the Sith sort of idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes faith can save a species, save a galaxy, save a world, and sometimes maybe it can destroy it. And so, like you said, it's playing with those themes that here, and that's sort of in the background of this really good character arc, because
Yeah.
we're getting bits and pieces of Officer Marloff. Particularly Father Vest, we're getting a lot about him. We don't know a lot about Sister Ray yet. All we know is that she's probably pretty attractive under those nun clothes.
Yeah,
But
that's he seems to be attracted, and I think that one of the fun things in this, like you said, like, I like one of the lines when you end up having Vess say, "Oh, they're gonna give me another chance, and what they want me to do is maybe fail so they could blame me, not their science, because the science failed." And even then, you see what might be people are going nuts on, like, the people are killing each other, pentagrams, all up because this is a devil, and what I really like where they go with the science and they do scan whatever science they have, advanced science, they are able to see there is a possession. I mean, scientifically, there's something inside this guy. They say they just can't get it out. And I do think that you're going to need faith to get it out, which he doesn't have. But when Sister Ray comes, one of the big things when she comes says, "I have my faith in you and you have faith in me." It's kind of the cool play there of what's going to happen, what's going on. And thank God that vest he ends up using pretty much his imprisonment because they do end up detaining him. And he uses that to clean himself up. He doesn't need the transubs. He ends up going through withdrawal and gets through that. And even through the withdrawal, he's having visions. He's it's the demon is talking to him. He's not sure if that's the withdrawal or the. I think it's really cool the way that it plays out and what does the government like, why do they need this dog? Like, you never really know this professor. Why do they need him? What are they doing? Are they trying something even worse than just getting a guy from being,
yeah,
possessed? And maybe there's
yeah,
some sort
it's
of thing with that too, and it's kind of cool to
yeah.
think.
One of the things that stood out for me is that when they were trying to use when the empire of this story was
Yeah.
trying to use science to cure the professor, they're shooting a laser beam into his brain and it doesn't seem to have any effect at all. And then in the very final page, all Father Vest does is throw some holy water
Yeah.
on him, and he reacts and he
Yeah, he
recoils.
reacts.
And so that's a pretty good sign that this was probably an exorcism is probably a good
Yeah,
idea.
it might be the way to go, and what makes me laugh, if you really think of it, it'd be like say we have a detective story, and you end up, Detective Rocky, he goes out and he's like, "You know what? I'm gonna go and talk to a clairvoyant person. I'm gonna go and see," and then the chief finds out, "Get that person out of here. That's nonsense. That's mumbo jumbo." And then they're at a dead end and go, "Yeah, call in that clairvoyant again." It ends up like that's what it reminds me of the
Yeah.
idea where they think they can do it like there it didn't work, so let's get him back, and I do even like such little things as Father Vest then says, as, Ray comes back and says, "You had faith in me, I have faith in you," whatnot, and then he says when he gets that holy water, because he's preparing the holy water, and he says, "Can a priest who lost his faith bless holy water? And does the magic still happen?" But then by the end, it looks like it does. I mean, so there's these weird plays of what that is, what it means. I think there's some pretty cool things, going on here, which keeps me going. And it's one of those two second reads really help as well because there's some little subtle things going on. This one I think is actually a little more straightforward than the first one, but even us going through this and seeing some of the things as it kind of, the broader picture opens up,
Well,
especially with this like, almost like a Nazi government that comes in and stops this and wants to use their science. I thought it was pretty cool.
yeah, and the final words leading artistically, uh again, the art's fantastic, but
Yeah.
artistically the look of Father Vest's face, he looks so determined at the end after he throws the
Oh
holy
yeah.
water, and he says, and the narration, mankind has escaped the constraints of earth, but it seems we've still got our demons.
Yeah.
And
That's
just a
cool.
perfect way to end it, because and it's so true. I mean, and of course, the symbolism I think is fairly obvious, and you can
Hmm.
read into it what you want. But I love this. Like, I would, I mean,
Yeah.
I was born Roman Catholic, and I remember, I since sort of become more spiritual, and I moved away from the Roman Catholic faith. But I remember when I was between 12 and 14 years old, we had this old abandoned milk factory in our
Mhm.
city, and rumor has it they had like demon worshippers in there. My
Okay,
friends
yeah,
and I
yeah.
would go in there on we'd sneak in there on Saturday nights
Oh,
and
jeez.
just like party and
Yeah.
drink and what have you, and pretend that we were like devil hunters and stuff like that.
Okay.
And anyways, so I kind of
Yes.
the shit you do when you're young and crazy.
It'd be
But
funny, you're in there yelling that you're devil hunters, somebody just walked by, heard that, and then assumed that they were devil worship you were the ones, you had twisted around. It ended up where you ended up causing it all. Oh my
uh,
goodness, but my dad actually was very religious, and we were Catholic, and he was gonna be a priest, and then decided at the last second not to do it. I think he liked the ladies a little too much is what ended up happening, and then actually, it's funny, you can go by whatever symbolism or whatever. He ended up deciding not to become a priest and then went in the military instead. I mean, he was definitely looking for something in some sort of way, but he ended up where I think that he kind of like he didn't raise us. We didn't go to church either. He was too lazy. He was a big man. He liked to eat, but he used to tell me just stuff from the Bible, not even reading the Bible. He'd just tell me stuff. So again, I probably know more than somebody normally who just didn't grow up religious or anything. But
right.
I am Catholic. I ended up, all the stuff with that, but really never went past just as a kid. It just kind of ended. But in that, I like the end where you have Father Vess. He seems like he's not as much of a sad sack. He was a bit of a sad. I mean, the first issue, he pretty much is a drug addict sad sack. He doesn't remember something went wrong with this exorcism. Oh, woe is me. I don't have my faith. He seems determined at the end. I mean, that look there is like, all right. And again, that's the cliffhanger. The cliffhanger is the character that we follow for only 2 issues, yet it kinda gets me pumped that he look like, that's the best he's looked too. I'm like, "Oh my, look at you." Like, he's ready to rock, and,
Yeah.
I kinda wanna see what goes from that because of how personal this demon has made this as well. I mean, really seems to be centering on Vess. Is this the setup? Like, you don't know because it's a devil and a demon, but let's see how this plays out because I think that it's really cool. It's really smart. I think that this is one of the better books that we've actually, done so far on the
Yeah,
podcast.
both in terms of art and
Yeah,
writing.
yeah, the
And
art kinda it's funny too because the art ends up where you're reading it and it's a dense read, and then when we're going through this, I'm like, "Holy crap, the art is good." Like what you said, like, when I'm reading it, I'm more of a, story guy anyway, but I'm concentrating and think and then I'm going and even some things that, like you said, the subtle expressions, on Father Vess are really good, but what would you give it?
I'd give this. I'm actually I'm more excited now after the first issue. I'm still at an 8.5. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, I'll go 8.5. I'll see you in 8.5 there. Yeah, I am too. And it's something that there's not really any other book that I'm reading right now that is quite like it. So it fills like that gap that I didn't even know that I needed. But we will go to the next book, and this is a book I said we really like the first issue. It's True Cult number 2. This one is, and let me get my solicits up here. It's written by, and let me go just by the deal because it doesn't even list everybody in this. I go by the comic book roundup deal, and it ends up driving me nuts sometimes because it doesn't really go through. It's Scott Bryan Wilson, writer and co-creator, and then Liana Kangas as art and co-creator as well. And you end up where this second issue it's very wordy. I think that there might have been a misplay the way this is, especially with trying to get into knowing these characters, not really knowing them. Now, Marty, you kind of got a good deal with, but some of the other things. But here is the solicit, and it is by IDW. The satanic panic continues. Marty realizes that Burger Lord wasn't so bad compared to the job of the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat has in store for him and Allison. Meanwhile, Bernice goes all CSI trying to figure out what's going on, and somebody's going to make out with rat blood in the parking lot. But who? No, it's not me. I hope you've got the extra large soda ready because things are getting spicy in this very special episode of True Cult. So you're playing up, that 80s feel, even with that solicit. But in that, like I said, I still It's not that I don't like the series, I just think that this issue might have been a bit of a misplay, especially when you get a lot of it where a hood is over our main character and his kind of assistant, Allison here, where you only get these stories, and I think that her going on and on, I mean, if we're supposed to like her at this point, I'm
Yeah.
starting to get annoyed with her. I think you're supposed to get annoyed, but in the point where I just kinda I don't know.
Well,
I think that the part where they're in the van, you could just take that completely out and then go to the other because once they get to, this satanic church and what's going on there, I get intrigued again. And I really like Bernice. I really like her trying to figure it out, but it takes a while to get to her as well. I think that again, I think that maybe this could have been tightened up to get really, really good because some the character work when you get I like, and I like this thing where Marty ends up not knowing what because we know that the idea of setting it up that he's just I don't want to say he's a moron, but he ends up like
well,
he's just the stoner guy who this big play of his lifelong dream of knocking off all of these stores. He does this, and then he ends up accidentally getting this thing from this satanic church. And the funny play is that when you get to them, you're
well,
expecting them to want to really kill him, but they think that
well,
they almost think he's the second coming here
they think
in
he's a
this deal,
criminal.
right?
The
Oh,
Veronica, the girl that
yeah.
captures him, she calls him a criminal. She
Yeah,
literally calls him a
mastermind.
criminal genius.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
says to him at the end, she says, "A cold, calculating, ruthless, emotionless criminal genius doesn't reveal himself very often." And so
Yeah.
she wants to recruit him to actually kill this Doctor Shiver, who is
Which I
this,
do like the name.
which is this sort of like this like leader
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
captain of the devil or something, who's been and
He's
as
been
leader of
alive
their
for over
cult.
300 years, and so and it is a fun now, here's the deal, the funny play of all this, and again, I think I'm already a little more positive with this. I just that middle section when they put the hoods on, I don't think you needed it. So when you get to the point where he is working this job at Burglar, which again, he's kind of a stoner, he's not doing much else, and this is his job, and he's good at it. You end up having when Bernice goes out, I like that when she's trying to find a flyer for this church because somehow in this town, the satanic church is just handing out flyers left and right. But she even says that he does his job too well. Marty cleans up too well the parking lot. So I like that and we talked about this and how I worked at, Hardee's, a fast food restaurant when I was a kid. And speaking of which, it just came in the news the past couple of weeks, which made me laugh. But in that, you end up where he has that job. He kind of wants to get himself better by knocking up, but then doesn't even have it because even when he says, I can bribe these people, but I don't have anything. So he really doesn't. And then the satanic cult gets him. That's kind of in their mind, their menial job that will never end because the lady says we have to do this for 666,666 years. That's too long. We don't like this job. And seem to think of the guy who hasn't done anything in his
Uh,
life is going to free them. And it made me laugh. By the
well,
end, I'm telling you, by the end, I was back in. It's just that
yeah,
one play. I thought just the idea of what is that fast food job that, yay, usually kids, but then now you have this cult that's the same deal that they wanted. They're slackers too in a
well,
cult, which made me laugh.
yeah.
But what did you like about it?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to reiterate a lot of what you said. Uh, Look, Marty's an idiot. Marty's a
Yeah.
moron. The first issue established him as a moron. He spends 5 years camping, basically vetting out and the whole mall, and he robs the mall. And he only gets like $400 or $500 cash, and then he steals a record that belongs to this cult of the.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell it's even called. Cult of the
It's the Church of the
Church of the.
Immortal Heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, and the irony here is, and this is where I think this would really, really work as a Netflix series, because
Hmm.
I think this issue would really work if it was played by a good actress, because the wordiness and the
It is a
over
lot wordy.
dialogue,
Yeah.
it would definitely work if you got a good actress that played it, because the funny thing here is that Allison and Marty are thrown in the back of a van, and what's really happening here, and I had to reread this 3 times
Hmm.
to figure out, because it was bothering me, the dialogue. I'm thinking, why the hell is she talking all the time? And then finally, I mean, it kind of clued in to me, because I found myself laughing the third time I read it, which was really odd. But Allison is so nervous. She's talking like she's still in the
Yeah.
job interview. And finally, Marty at the end basically tells her, Allison, look, you
You
got
got
the
the job.
job
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
But I
It's
mean,
weird too. I mean, even
uh,
if you played it, it's weird because when you have her and you see her herself, it's so odd. Like if she isn't nervous, it even makes me laugh because she's just crazy. But I think now with that, you have Marty desperately trying to figure out, and it's pretty cool. And he says, I've seen these movies before. Okay, we turn left. This must be us going out of the deal on the main. Now we're turning, and then you get to the point where, again, this is something that drives my wife insane. If this was me, we would get to the part that made me laugh with Marty because he goes, "Okay, I think we went down that street that I don't know its name," and then he's completely lost, and that's what
yeah,
happens with me. I don't know. Or if my wife says, "Well, how do I get to here in town?" Like I'll sit there and go, "Well, you go down that one street near the hospital." And I don't know street names even in the town I've grown up in and lived my whole life. It's just, and I like when he's doing that. And again, I think that the funny play, like you said, is that Marty is a idiot. He is. But you know what? He's a likable idiot because we saw little things. And this is where I even said when we first started out with the Kevin Smith book, The Maskerade, not really liking anybody in that first issue. You didn't really establish any character for me to say, okay, that's my character I want to have. I mean, even the one that's the most likable might have been that Dwayne, but he's also screwing a married woman. So you end up where Marty, he is the lovable loser. You end up rooting for him because you want him to, because he was nice. When he ended up robbing the people, he was the most polite robber. I even joked that he
yeah,
must have been Canadian because of the way he was doing it, because of the way it was played. And so you like him. And so you want him. And the funny play is that you're worried that he's going to be in big trouble here. And yet you're going to get almost like, I mean, again, if I'm going to go with the, how I said, the religious Blade Runner, to this, it reminds me of the kind of like the religious and anti-religious, the satanic cult version of Galaxy Quest, where they end up thinking that Marty is the answer, and Marty's the answer to nothing.
yeah.
I mean, I like too when he's sitting there trying to figure it out, and like, where did I go wrong? And then he starts thinking about the cult and things like that and satanic stuff. And I love the idea that he is one of those guys. He's a stoner guy who loves heavy metal. He likes, even when we see things from the background, he loves that. So he even says, "Yeah, I'll throw up the devil horns at, an Iron Maiden concert and stuff like that." But he never believed in that. That's just something to do. That's, he'd write, probably 666 on his book in school, but he never thought of that and never went into it. That was just fun to do. And now he's like right in front. Oh my God, that's what you guys do. And the play, though, again, in my mind too, is like, is this one of those where Marty, like, this is like, okay, well, this job might be a little better being like this genius with this cult, but he's not a genius. He's going to get himself in some trouble. But
No,
I did like that play. And then with that Allison, when she finds, hey, you got the job. Just shut up, please. She's like, oh, thank God. Like she was still nervous. She wasn't going to get the job. Allison, you are going towards maybe your possible death. Just stop.
yeah,
And even then, this is why and I like that you're saying like the idea of it being nerves, but I still like the idea that she only knows, the burger lord, because she's still even concerned if this cult leader, because they end up grabbing the food and they're giving it to this lady who's their boss, and you end up, Allison, do you like it? Like, is it a good burger? Like, and then even then, they're in the middle of like the craziest thing: a shark hanging on the wall, pentagrams, skulls. Allison's still going to Marty at points. Well, I could start at the fries. Like, I understand that, but if you let me go to the grill, I can manage that. And then she's so nice. She's like, I don't mean like manager. I don't want to step on your toes, but I think it's just a wacky two people here. And then even to tie it in where we did have that the police came, and at that point where Marty thought they had figured it out. Oh my God, what did I do? But they were just there to talk to people about it. But the one police officer does seem to like Bernice from the store and gives the card. Hey, and I even like her, like she's playing it cool, and like he's like, hey, I want to give you my number. She's like, oh, I know your number. It's 911, right? And he's like, no, 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 like my number. And now she's gonna need to call because she starts working. And I really like the idea. Bernice seemed like she did not like Marty at a bit. Like She does, but this you see that she does. I mean, you see, and even when she remembers how nice he was, even if nice means inviting her to a heavy metal concert that she's not into, she realizes, and then it even seems at one point she was in the hospital for whatever, and Marty seemed to be the only one who even cared. And even like on the flowers that he sent, it's like Marty from work, as if she wouldn't even know who it was. And I thought that that was really good. Like again, as Bernice starts doing, and it says in that solicit the CSI work, she goes out, finds the gun, ends up where she looks at the, the deal with the surveillance camera and sees and knows what's going on. She knows that these guys are people from this church that, so she's on the case, but is that going to be good enough? And what it's crazy. And again, I don't think that Marty quite realizes what the hell is even happening as they're talking about, hey, we want you to be involved here and you have this many years, but we want you to kill this guy. He's so oblivious to things and kind of an idiot that it's just
Well,
crazy.
that's part of the charm of this story
Yeah.
is that Marty doesn't have a lot of self confidence.
No.
He worked up. It took him 5 years to work up enough confidence to even do a small
Yeah.
robbery, which was a joke. And then
Which
he
he
ends up
thought was
stealing.
great, right?
And then he ends up stealing some record or album from the delivery driver who and stealing what was supposed to be delivered to this Church of the Immortal Heartbeat. And then
Yeah.
of course. If it's even possible, he gets kidnapped by what could possibly be people that are even more stupid than he is. This
Yeah.
Veronica woman,
Yeah.
and like you said, I thought it was extremely revealing. Like when Veronica is sitting uh, in front of her office at the
Yeah.
warehouse, located at 66 6th Street, by the
Yeah.
way. I mean, can't make
Yeah.
this shit up. A shark above a hexagon devil
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
thing. I mean, it's just wearing purple. She's got green hair. I mean, this woman cries out mental illness by every stretch of the imagination.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, she's the one in charge. You see, even these other 2, and again, you expect her to be really mean, but she doesn't even come off like that eventually. And these 2 bumbling idiots that end up grabbing Marty and Allison, they're not even that they're kind of goofballs themselves. Like everybody's goofballs, even when Bernice finds out the address of this church. It's 66 6th Street. She's like, really? Like she's the one who actually seems to have a little intelligence to her. She's there looking at the surveillance. She's looking at that. Even her coworker is going to go out and make out with her boyfriend, who ends up, you know how he is. If I don't go out there, he gets mad. But somebody's got to make out with him, and they go out. So it's funny where you have what could be this cast of characters that are all just kind of not really with it, a lot of it, but we'll see how it goes. And I think the play here is eventually it's going to be the idea of them having to save the world, that you're going to have this demonic thing going on that is in fact real, and all these things going down, and you might have to have these crazy things going on. And I'll even give you the idea that if you read I think it was Image and Rick Remender, The Scumbag, the book, The Scumbag,
I love
it
that guy.
had like a kind of a cool deal. But in this, though, like the Scumbag, you never want to root for him. I mean, he is bad. But in this, it's kind of that kind of deal. And it makes me laugh because I want Marty to have some sort of win, but I'm not so sure that I don't want Marty just to lead the Satanic Church. I mean, I just want him to have something for himself. And I think, and I hope that by the end, you have to have Marty say something. But this is a satanic cult, and it's called the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat. That sounds like a Culture Club album. That does not sound heavy metal satanic to me. That sounds so and I hope he says something. I hope he makes fun of it that he said, because I'm telling you, when I see that, and maybe that's to hide in plain sight, though. But still,
Well,
the funny thing is everybody knows about them too. They're not even that subtle. People around town, they're handing out flyers. So crazy.
Well,
But yeah,
and there's 3 things you gotta sign on to when you join the cult. You gotta sign a contract saying you'll serve them for 600, like you said, 666,666 years. You
which
gotta
is funny.
obey their every word, and you gotta recognize that Dr. Shiver is the Almighty Satan, the Great
Yeah.
Deceiver. But as Veronica says at the end, which I find hilarious, is that they've she's run out of patience. She doesn't want to wait that many years, and so
No, it's too
she
long.
wants to take over. So would you mind killing Dr. Shiver for us?
Yeah.
And because you're
Which
such a
frees
criminal,
them, they think. Yeah. Yeah, you're a criminal mastermind. I love
yeah,
the idea where this Veronica, who is the at least the sub leader here, she's kind of the area manager, I guess, but she didn't quite get in her mind when she signed on that 666,666 years is a long time. She then says, "You ever think about it? That's a pretty long time." I'm like,
yeah,
"You should have thought about that before." But yeah, she ends up where the big twist at the end is legitimately where you think that they are going to kill Marty and Allison when in fact they recognize him. Oh, he stole that record that we want. Well, that means he's a genius. All
and we
he
don't even
did
know what
was
the record is. We
I
don't even know
know,
why it's
and at the
important.
last second, telling you there's gonna be something funny with that it's not gonna be what Marty's is gonna and here's the play in my mind. You end up where Marty thinks that this record has to be heavy metal, something that he would really like, but wouldn't Satan more be like a Christina Aguilera, something like that, or whatever
Well,
you like, it'll be that funny play, I
right,
think.
here's you talk about a funny play. I mean, I part of me is thinking that every new character we meet gets dumber and dumber and
Oh,
dumber,
yeah.
and this Veronica is almost I don't think she's any more smarter than Marty is, and I'm
No.
wondering, this Dr. Shiver, does he have an IQ below 10? I mean, like, how
He might
I
be
can't
just
wait to meet
really
this guy.
dumb.
He's gonna be
Uh
like a Mike Myers or something, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it is crazy, and again, the one guy and I'm not saying that he's smart, but at least he had information. Rat Blood actually at
Yeah.
least knew where the church was.
Yeah.
I mean, he's their Rat Blood, and it's funny too because they're like, "Hey, what's that satanic?" Oh, you mean the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat? And he even says, "Hey, I like the symbolism, man. I like, it's kind of cool to me, but I'm not into that." It's kind of like Marty said about the heavy metal stuff, which I do like, and I end up where I am intrigued to see how this will play off with Marty because really he doesn't have that many other options anyway. So I think he's just like, oh, what the heck? That sounds good, but we'll see how this happens. But how the bumbling Marty is going to end up doing this. And then you go and see the next cover, and it looks like Marty is laying in the middle of the desert dead. And I'm like, what happened? But that could be even a Bill and Ted deal where he ends up going to hell. I don't know. It'd be crazy, but with all that, again, we talked more about the positives. I do think that middle section was a little too long with them being hooded. I think it was clever to kind of go and have Allison going with the nervous talk, but it didn't equal out to anything. And then also Marty's trying desperately to go with, okay, we turn left, turn right, turn left. Okay, we're on this street. Oh no, I just done messed up. Also, Allison is yipping and yapping. It didn't really play out as much. It
Yeah.
ended up being kind
It
of funny at first, but it didn't really amount to anything story-wise, and I think that could have been taken out to make this because it is still a wordy chapter even without that, and I think that ended up with no art at all really pushed the envelope of, "Yeah, I don't really need this," but,
yeah.
any other things for you?
No, just to reiterate that there was a little bit too much dialogue there, and I know why they were doing that. They were
Yeah,
trying to establish that I think Allison was really nervous, and they were trying to imbue it with some humor. And again, I really do think it would probably have worked better if this was actually a TV show, and that was actually
yeah,
But it doesn't work well on the comic book page, and it looks like the artist is being lazy because they just want to put word balloons and exposition on a
yeah.
page and avoid doing art. So it doesn't really hit for me. So I did lower my score because of that.
Mhm, yeah, still though, I like it. I
Yeah,
still do like it. What would you give it?
I'll give it a 6.5, lower than the first
Okay.
issue, but I'll give it a 6.5. Uh, but maybe I could go up to a seven.
I'm
You
actually
know,
going 7.5, so
okay,
you can go to 7. Just the idea though, because I like again, to push that part aside, and yes, it's very wordy and maybe a little too wordy at points, but I do still like the characters, and I didn't really like in the first issue, Bernice was there, and okay, there she but this issue, I really like her, and for
yeah,
some reason, the idea that maybe because Allison is such a go-getter and really all these things I mean, at one point, she's like, "Hey, they told me to do the grease trap, and I realized that if I do the grease trap right, then that means that I'm good." And she's really into it. I'm assuming that if they do and how far this goes, she's gonna maybe get really into the satanic cult as well or something. But I like her, even though it annoyed me, her yakety yak, I still liked her as well, and for some reason, I like this Veronica who didn't really play out the idea that she didn't know that 666,000 years was that long, and it made me giggle, like, the evil person who we're supposed to be, "Oh my god, they're gonna cut his head off." No, 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 she's kinda goofy herself, everybody's goofy, so I kinda like the characters, and so I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. And it's again, it's something that surprised me. I do also think that maybe, just maybe, that title didn't really need the V's. It might have been just true cult. Might have been better to play it out that way because maybe you're getting too clever for a title, and then it's kind of a pain. And what I'm saying is, it's a pain every time I go to write it out. I have to think hard to
Yeah.
put those V's because I'm a dummy like Marty. I just
Yeah.
the idea of all this, though, I do like it. I'm gonna go 7-5, but we're gonna finish up with "There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd" number 3, which I said at the beginning, I actually really do like this book, and this me and you didn't see this issue coming, right? We really thought that it was on the money that Patrick Todd's dad was coming to find him. We didn't quite understand what his dad was up to. He ends up having that metal contraption on his head. This issue twists it around where we find out it's a little darker, and some of the things that were right. Patrick Todd is
Yeah.
not on the up and up, and the problem is he doesn't seem to remember, and we even talked about the idea, can he kinda manipulate his own brain to forget things and whatnot? But we'll find out. This is the issue number 3, written by Ed Brisson with art by Gavin Guidry. It's by Aftershock Comics, and here is the solicit. It's Patrick versus Zeus. Where did the machete-wielding maniac Zeus come from, and how does he know so much about Patrick? Secrets about Patrick, his mother, and his telepathic powers begin to bubble to the surface. Even if Patrick manages to survive, he'll never be the same again. Pretty good solicit there because it's true. Now, we thought that the Zeus character was indeed like we never went with the idea that he was an unreliable narrator. The deal we're like, okay, Patrick Todd screwed up himself, so why shouldn't this be his dad coming to find him? It's not. He ends up where this guy, in a weird way, I mean, this guy is the villain, but is he? Because Patrick Todd himself might be the villain. This guy might be the freedom fighter that's trying, though he's a little over the top. I'll tell you, you start beheading people, you're not really going to get a lot of sympathy from me and you, I would guess, right? Maybe I shouldn't speak for you, but I think that beheading is off the list. So you end up with all this where it's just pretty crazy. I don't know that I know that the big play and the big bookends and how we're gonna get back and anchor the whole deal is gonna be this detective who's on the case. He's gonna be, tracking him down. I think that he's gonna find out more than even Patrick Todd knows about himself. So that might be the idea, even at the end, him being able to save Patrick Todd, maybe even from himself or whatever. But you end up starting with him. He's seen some bad stuff. I mean, when you end up where you're eating, and I'm
Yeah.
surprised it wasn't his wife, like, "Honey, you wanna put ketchup on that?" Because he just looks at the eggs.
Yeah.
He ends up having the sunny side up eggs and hits it, and the yolk pulls out, and all he thinks is blood pouring out of a decapitated body, and he throws up. I do like his son, who right away, this is a quick thinking kid. Right away, "Dad's sick, I get to stay home from school." All right, like, whatever. And in that,
Yeah.
it's a weird play to start out with that. I thought you were playing the idea of, here's a pretty nice family together, right? And that you find out even more nefarious things and dark things with Patrick Todd, who's desperate. You see him waiting for what he thinks is his father with the Zeus in the park. Even the Zeus, when he shows up, says, "You're pretty smart. You're in you know, a public area. There's a lot of people around, but you're going to come with me." And there's some cool plays here where just little asides where you end up having Patrick Todd. There's this guy standing there with his phone, and he goes, "Hey, are you here for me?" And the guy isn't. He's there. He's waiting for his wife or girlfriend, and it's kind of a shame. You almost wish that, oh man, Patrick, you could have had. Wouldn't that have been a nice life if that was your dad? Because your dad's showing up and he looks insane. He's beheading people. Oh no, it's not your dad, and that's where you get that crazy deal. But I'll give it to you because then we go and you're going to continue this, this detective trying to go on the case of these murders and who this Patrick Todd is, who's this other guy, and all that. This poor guy from the motel, this guy they really picked the wrong person to rob because this really threw him into some crazy stuff here, and this guy's losing his mind.
Yeah, it's so much. This third issue, everything really comes into play here, and what I really like about this is that I feel I've been rewarded because you and I we read the previous two issues, and you and
Mhm.
I were speculating.
Yeah,
And we were actually right in a lot of our speculations. We were asking the right
yeah.
questions, and we were right in terms of, Patrick Todd is screwed up, and we had some theories that Patrick Todd's mind
Mother.
powers
Yeah.
are causing problems and are actually, it appears to be Patrick Todd. The detective discovers Patrick Todd's own best friend, Joel,
Oh,
actually
yeah.
died of a brain aneurysm, and other people are dying of brain aneurysms because of their proximity to Patrick Todd, or presumably when he uses his powers, and
Mhm.
and Patrick Todd doesn't seem to be aware of it. And I really like the fact that it was just those little seeds that were planted, those little hints that were planted in the first and second issues that allowed us readers to brought us in and encouraged us to make
Mhm.
those guesses. And when we're right, I feel rewarded, and I feel,
I'm with you.
and I like that, because I actually like, because I'm a dummy half the time. I like when I actually can figure stuff out a little bit, and I
Oh,
feel
I'm
a
a
little bit
real dummy, and
rewarded.
I'm with you. And I think Ed Brisson does a really good job. And one of the plays is, and I think that you probably had that same. I think everybody who read it would have this deal as you're going through this, and you have the detective looking into it. They don't like. They don't. He doesn't have to come out and say, "Oh my God, Patrick Todd killed his best friend." We haven't really seen. But when they say, "Oh, that kid died, brain aneurysm," and oh man, and you're like, "Holy crap!" Like that's like
Yeah.
maybe even like maybe he didn't mean it or whatnot, but even so, you don't have to even go any further than just saying brain aneurysm. You're like, oh, Patrick, what did you do? And the funny play is as you go to this third issue, as we were making our things, and at least me going through and we're making some things, we said there might be something more to the mom. The idea that we even speculate maybe at one point it was just like he got mad and ended up, oh my God, I didn't mean that. But
Yeah.
I never put Patrick Todd into a real evil light. We end up seeing him, and it almost feels like, oh my God, this guy might be his dad, who ends up being the Zeus. Like, okay, something was bad. He had to fight back or whatever. When Zeus shows up, and he is awful, but what he says and what is revealed really does make that, okay, Patrick, what the hell is happening? You aren't good. You just don't realize it. Because even the play of, okay, I end up where, and I said it was a lot like Death Note if you're a manga fan, where he needed money for his mom, so he'd make people commit bank robbery, but they were bad people that got away with a crime. He knew this, so he was able to use people that were already bad and get arrested like that. But when Zeus comes and says, I love when Patrick tries to use his power. He's like, take your hands off of me. And he's like, nope, got this for protection. A device that we thought was wacky, right? And it still looks
Hey,
it. I mean, he might as well have tinfoil on his head,
we
but it
called it. We
works.
called it. We
Yeah, yeah.
predicted he has to
Oh,
wear
yeah.
that. We
Yep,
called
he's
it.
wearing that. And once he starts saying this is the crazy deal, because as he is now chasing down Patrick runs. He takes off almost like a Ferris Bueller type deal, except in Ferris Bueller you don't have beheadings. But he ends up what he's saying and what he's through this is the idea that Patrick Todd, it's not even just him on his own. You people, you're kind, and you start really wondering, like, what is going on? What is happening? And this guy, this Zeus, who's the awful of the awful, says, hey, you killed my family. Your people killed my family. Patrick has no idea. And the thing that makes Patrick run, and it's pretty horrific, when he takes him to the car. He opens up his back of his car, in the trunk, there's just severed heads. So this guy kept those heads. It's awful. And he runs. And this other poor guy, it's just luck of the draw. This guy ends up where Patrick goes into the house and the Zeus follows him. But through that, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to think of like crazy stuff. The idea where he says, you're kind, you're this. I'm like, what is going on here? And what is the deal? Because I
There-
still don't know you can trust this, but you kind of do. You
Yeah.
kind of think that what he's saying is at least his version of what happened, but maybe, the twists and turns, we find out that there's way, way more into this. But telling you, by the end, I wouldn't have even been shocked if they said, oh, by the way, Patrick Todd's an alien. I don't know because of how crazy the stuff that this guy is saying, and he's said, stop it. And he says, everybody you're around, their mind turns to mush. And yeah, there's this best friend aneurysm. His mom is pretty much, has nothing up there. She ends up being, pretty much in a walking coma type deal where so I wonder
Yeah.
what
Well,
exactly is going on.
and it's exactly the question that detective, Bradley,
Yeah.
Brad, the detective Brad, that he's saying to himself. He at one point he says he mumbles to himself, like Patrick, what are you doing to people?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. What
it's
are you
almost like he
doing?
knows that Patrick is probably not doing it on purpose, but maybe kind of is. So he knows something is up,
Yeah.
and the detective. What I love about it is that we actually we don't know we know a little bit more than the detective does, but
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
that much more
Not
than the
much.
detective.
No.
Other than that, we got this crazy Zeus character. I love that Zeus is still kind of a wild card. He's wearing that ridiculous contraption that
Oh
we
my
joke
God.
about before,
Yeah.
but he obviously needs it. But he obviously was probably maybe a little bit off his rocker to begin with. Where we might even writer Ed Brisson here, he might really. I'm going to give him full props here. If we end up having full sympathy for Zeus, that's
I
really going to
know.
pull something because maybe Patrick Todd is the bad guy, total psychopath himself. Maybe he did something to make himself look and forget that he's a serial killer, and maybe Zeus is the victim here. Maybe he made Zeus who he was, because if it's one thing for Zeus to, I can understand Zeus going after Patrick for revenge, maybe,
Hmm.
but why is Zeus cutting off other people's
Well,
heads?
that's
Like
that's
that's
my big play.
yeah,
That's the weird part, right? So we'll
yeah.
have to that has to be resolved, and I'm with you. The idea that maybe Zeus, has gone insane because he says, "You murdered all my family," but he says it in a way at points where it doesn't seem like it might have been Patrick himself. He ends up saying these things with, "Your type did that, and I'm gonna do this," but he says, "You're kind. You get in our brains, you make us do what you want." Even though you know it destroys our minds. So he's not just talking about Patrick. So what is this?
Yeah.
What is going on and how does this play
And
out?
and
And
here's
maybe
here's another question for you. Where if Zeus isn't Patrick's father, where is Patrick's father?
yeah, exactly, and who that is, and I think that that's the big key, and even when he says leaves us as vegetables, so you almost get the idea where Patrick's big thing and where we're sympathetic to him as his mom is a vegetable. We're assuming this whole time that he did something that did it. Even this best friend, I mean, you would think he did some I think that maybe the twist is he has this power, but maybe there's others involved. Maybe his dad, maybe there's a whole group of these people that do these things and he's not quite doing everything somebody else is, but it's very odd because he says, as long as you get what you want, all of you are happy. You don't care who you hurt, even your own mother. You're all monsters, not just saying Patrick. So there's that weird, like really expands the things going on. But again, Patrick has no idea what he's talking about. He has no idea. And we even said, like I said before, we thought that maybe can he erase his own mind? Can he end up where he manipulates his own deal to forget things and tries to get away? Or is this like we may end up where Zeus ends up being the one that's his like he is the freedom fighter for Patrick? There might be a point where there's a cult. Again, I'm just throwing things out there, but Patrick's way out, if there is this group and all these things where he's on the run, his only hope might be Zeus, who seems to know what's going on. Nobody else seems to
Yeah.
know any of this.
Maybe
He
it's the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat that's going to be
Exactly,
the
it's the
villain.
Church of the Immortal Heartbeat, it's the Church of the Immortal, I'm gonna, make your brain think things and whatnot, but just that this guy is so in tune with what he knows to wear that crazy getup. He knows all this. I mean, I wanna know what's up with the poncho, but still, I mean, that might just be his fashion sense, but still. Oh, so it probably is easier to hide a machete in a poncho. Uh, but yeah, this guy we may get twists and turns with this, and I think that that would be really cool. And again, props because the idea where, oh man, this kid, I feel bad for him. Oh no, this kid's awful. Oh no, feel bad for him again. And somehow this guy who's beheading people is the sympathy. That's the craziest deal. If you said it, if you can make this Zeus guy become somebody that we root for and actually trust and like, you have done the most incredible job in comics history
Yeah.
because this guy is off. He beheads people. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all I need to know. and we
Well,
don't know why and what he's doing that for, so we're gonna have to figure that
Well, I
out.
know one
It's
of the things that I think you've made the comment I've heard in some of your past podcasts. You've made the comment before about mysteries, about what some
yeah,
comic
yeah.
writers get right, or get wrong about mysteries. Is that it's not really a mystery unless you plant seeds,
Yeah.
unless it's possible of being figured out by the reader. It's not an
Mhm.
actual mystery. And so, what I like about this, again, as a compliment to Ed Brisson, the writer, is that there's seeds that are planted here that if you're an astute reader or
Yeah.
even not that astute, you can kind of pick up on it. And that's what I like about it. And it's really intriguing. And again, there's rewards here to be had as the story gets along. And again, we still have some, I now have confidence that I'm definitely picking up and finishing this
Yep.
story arc because I believe that I'm going to get a payoff because I've already gotten a payoff by the third issue. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, this is strangely one of my favorite comics that we do, and I tend to forget about it, because the other stuff that we do, and you have your, DC deal, I have my that is like, okay, good, like, this podcast is for fun, like, we're enjoying it, and then I like, "Oh, man, Patrick Todd came out." I end up
Uh,
getting excited when I saw it, and,
mm,
yeah, when I talk about that, my big thing, and this is just me, but I do think that some writers think that a mystery is just withholding all the information.
mm,
That's not a mystery. That's
mm.
just you withholding all the information. I like to play along, and we're playing along, and we've been right on some things, but now we're starting to think that we were right, but in a different way, but we'll see this, so I like it. I really do. And this is my favorite book that we did tonight. This is easily my favorite book. What would you give it?
I'm giving this a solid. I'm gonna give it a solid 9.5. I really like
I'm
it.
going 9.3. I'm gonna go a little I could go because really everything pushes the story forward. You're starting to even, have sympathy for the detective who's involved, but
Yeah.
realizing he's gonna be a bigger part of it. Now, when I said that, you end up Zeus, like the idea of trying to explain why he's beheading people and whatnot. Because he beheads, it seems, this guy, this poor guy that Patrick Todd just runs through his yard. Because at the end, you do see the slice. Maybe it's one of those where we find out again that when he says this guy might be like something might go wrong and he's being a nice guy by beheading you. Is that possible? The idea Patrick Todd ended up making your mind, you're going to have an aneurysm, you're going to get mush. I'm putting you out of your misery now. Or maybe when he does this, just does something like I think that that's going to be a big play. Obviously, you have to explain why the guy's beheading everybody and then keeping the heads. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
I wanna
intrigued.
I wanna give a compliment to the artist Gavin, Guidry.
Hmm.
I think it's, because the art works very well. You do get a sense of, terror from this Zeus. I mean,
Yeah.
when Patrick is running away from him, and you really feel sorry for the other guy, the owner of the house that Patrick just sort of stumbles upon, who ends up, of course, being a victim of Zeus. It works really well. Good artistic, good expressions on the faces. The coloring by Chris, O'Halloran or
Yeah.
Albert, just very good. So, I mean, artistically, this works. The art complements the story very well. It's consistent. It's the same artist from issue to issue. This really works, and so it definitely that the art, if in the hands of a different artist, this this would
Yeah.
not be as good as it is.
I agree. And it's funny too because we didn't even say at the end. You end up where Patrick Toddy goes out. The police have all arrived. This guy called 911. So the police show up. Patrick Todd goes out and he's like, "Hey, he's in the house. He's there." They go, "Okay, you're safe now." They put him, and he's there with a police officer. He uses the mind whammy on this police officer and says, "You're going to let me go because this guy. First off, you'd need to question him at least that, but says." We're going to make sure you're okay. We'll take you to the hospital, all that. And then he uses his deal and says, "You're going to let me go. Also, give me your gun." He gives him the gun. And I love where it's so much that then the police officer salutes Patrick as if like this is the greatest thing. Like this kid's so great. And then Patrick walks away. And I like even the play of the art where you see him, he's like putting the gun into his backpack as he walks. But then you see off panel, hear the drop the knife, drop the bang, 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 and you're like, "Oh my god, did Zeus get killed?" I will say that when you
Yeah,
go to the next up, you've mentioned Zeus, so it kind of plays off that, but
yeah,
it is kind of crazy. Maybe even the idea that what we see that no, and he slashes, maybe he ends up hurting himself so that when the people come in the play, they actually think that the guy who's innocent is the bad guy. And also the drop the knife, that's hardly a knife. That thing's a machete. So I
Yeah,
wonder what
yeah.
may have went on there and what happened and whatnot, but it's kind of a crazy play. And like you said, one of the biggest mysteries then is who is the father? Who is his father and what's going on? I think that that is something that will have to go. And I think that that will be where Detective Brad Anderson comes in for us, where he's on the case. And I like that play where you actually have a detective going on the background of this while we see things unfold. So I'm going to go 9-5 with you. I'm going to go up to that. So that is the end of the show. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks again, Rocky, for doing this with me. It is something that I look forward to, even though I end up where we have to figure out what we're going to do and it takes me a while. I got to get on that to let you know earlier. But with all that, everybody, as we say at the end, please check out everything here. If you're watching this on Rocky's YouTube channel, the Comic Boom channel, check out all of the stuff on here, including his DC video. I always want to say podcast, but his DC show with Jace, which is really, really good. So check that
And
out.
check out Weird Science, the Weird Science DC podcast, Weird Science manga. You guys do Marvel. You guys you review everything,
Yeah.
uh, and I always tell people to if they can join the Get Fresh crew of the Weird
Mm-mm.
Science.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good times. It's good times, and it's a great community, and we just talk comics, and that's why I mean.
Yeah.
I always, like I said, you guys got me back more enjoying DC than ever before, and encouraged
Cool.
me to continue to do what I do. So, yeah,
Yeah.
and check out this as a podcast. Those I know most people prefer to hear these reviews as podcasts, so check it out. Weird Science DC. You
Yeah,
have a
I end up
specific
it's on its own feed, so I
right?
end up having it on its own feed that just is the Weird Science indie comic boom deal all by itself, so you can
Yeah.
check that out and just search it by the title. And yeah, it's funny too because at points I want to get some YouTube stuff going, but we do so many podcasts, and I'm like, well, should we do more videos? Because people love the videos as well, but there's time constraints. Like there's no more time. My wife will kill me. But eventually, I'll get an even keel between the two. But yeah, everybody check out all our stuff. It'll be in the show notes, especially if you're listening to this on a podcast deal. I'll send you over to Rocky's channel. Just look in the show notes and all of that. But anything else, Rocky?
No, I guess just looking forward to more indies. I know
Yeah,
this next week's going to be pretty damn good from what I can see, and I'm looking forward to reviewing some
yeah.
DC comics this week and hearing your viewpoints on that.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
funny because you say that, and there's some really good Image comics coming up. There's some stuff that we've been waiting to review, and even some
yeah.
other stuff from, people who we've even had on tonight's show. They have some other stuff coming out, so we're going to end up doing a bunch of that stuff. So that's cool. There's always comics coming out. That's what the cool thing about it is, and there's always something for somebody. So with that though, you send us out of here, and then we're done.
All right, guys, thanks for listening, and until next time, Comic Boom and Weird Science out.